For this video, we're going to focus on the male anatomy. We'll go into the female anatomy in another video. The male anatomy has 7 main parts to it, some of which are by themselves and others which are paired. The numbers you see beside each of the names of the structures tell you how many an individual would have under normal circumstances. We have the scrotum, 2 testes, 2 epididymids, or epididymis if you're looking at a singular one, 2 vasa deferentia, or vas deferens if you're referring to one, a urethra. There's 3 glands involved, including the prostate, the seminal vesicles, and the bulbourethral gland, as well as the penis. We're going to go into each of these structures and talk about what they do and how they contribute to reproductive success in males. Let's look at where these structures are located. Here we have the scrotum, which is a sac-like structure. We have a testis, this smooth egg-like shaped structure you see. The epididymis, which is kind of hugging over the top of that testis. The vas deferens, which is this long tube-like structure we see wrapping around. A seminal vesicle. It's this structure here. Quite honestly, to me, I describe it as looking like chewed gum. The prostate. The bulbourethral gland. The urethra. And the penis. If we look at it from a front view rather than a side view, we see 2 testes, 2 epididymids, 2 vasa deferentia, 2 seminal vesicles, the prostate, the bulbourethral gland, the urethra, and the penis. I would be familiar with both the side and front view of the male anatomy. Let's talk about what each of those structures do now. The scrotum and the testes are found together along with the epididymids. The scrotum is mainly a storage facility that holds the testes. So both of the testes will be found within the scrotum. But the scrotum isn't necessarily just sitting there holding on to these. They are going to help regulate the temperature of the testes. Sperm production is sensitive to temperature. These testes do not want to be too hot or too cold. And for the most part, the core body temperature is too high for the testes to function properly. This is why we have them extending down from the core body in a scrotum instead of deeper inside. However, if it's really cold out, the scrotum can bring the testes up closer to the main body to help retain warmth. The testes themselves are the primary sex organs within the male reproductive system. They're paired, and their job is to produce sperm as well as male sex hormones like testosterone. They're composed of seminiferous tubules that wind around where sperm is produced. The epididymis hugs over the top of the testes, and the epididymis will hold on to sperm until it fully matures and is ready to use. Let's look at those lobules, those interstitial cells in the seminiferous tubules that are producing the sperm and testosterone. So if we take a section here, we see this winding structure that's kind of going all over the place in and out of these. These are the seminiferous tubules. If we take a cross section, so we take one of these tubes and we cut it all the way across to look at the inside, we see the sperm being produced inside the seminiferous tubule. And they're being helped along in the production process by Sertoli cells. So Sertoli cells are found inside the seminiferous tubules and help with the production of sperm. Now, there are also cells hanging out between the seminiferous tubules. It's not just empty space. The cells hanging out in the space between the tubules are called interstitial cells, and interstitial cells help produce the sex hormones like testosterone. So sperm is produced within the seminiferous tubules. The Sertoli cells will help regulate the process of sperm production, also known as spermatogenesis. And then once the sperm have been produced, they can be stored and fully mature in the epididymis until they're ready to use. Let's look at what sperm looks like on a microscopic level. It's important to note sperm anatomy because then it helps you understand how sperm is able to travel as far as it does. There are three main parts to a single spermatid. There is the head, which has a little kind of hat or cap-like structure called the acrosome. We have a middle piece, and we have a tail. The acrosome on the head has special enzymes that are needed to penetrate the egg. We'll go into that later, of why we need special enzymes to get into the egg. The middle piece has many mitochondria to make ATP. If you think about the distance that a single sperm will travel in search of an egg to fertilize, it's an extremely long distance. It's going to have to swim that entire distance as well. And in order to do that, it's going to need a lot of energy. Having many mitochondria to produce ATP will help it make its journey. And then since we're swimming, we need a way to move. The tail helps provide that movement. If we move on to the vas deferens and urethra, both of these structures have a similar job. They're both going to help move something from one location to the next. In the case of the vas deferens, we're moving sperm to the urethra. So the vas deferens takes sperm from the epididymis and moves it through towards the urethra. The urethra takes that sperm and moves it outside of the body. Now let's look at the three glands. So far we've talked about sperm, but we haven't talked about semen. Semen is consisting of sperm as well as some other elements, but where do those other elements come from? Sperm by itself would not be able to travel very far without the rest of the factors involved with semen. So let's talk about each of the glands involved in the production of semen and what they do. The seminal vesicles will produce a sugary fluid that provides energy to the sperm. Remember, we have mitochondria that are making ATP, but what are the sources of energy for those mitochondria to use? The sugary fluid can help power those mitochondria and allow them to create the mass amount of ATP that's needed. The prostate gland produces an alkaline fluid. The reason we need an alkaline fluid, also known as a basic fluid, is because the vagina has an acidic pH. So the pH of the vagina is very low. The prostate gland produces an alkaline fluid that has a higher pH. This helps neutralize the acidic environment of the vagina to keep the sperm safe. And lastly, the bulbourethral glands produce a mucus that will act as a lubricant. This will help the sperm move in general. Lastly, we get to the penis. The penis is the copulatory organ, meaning this is the organ that's used for sexual intercourse. It's also used for urination. This is an interesting point. When we look at the male reproductive system, we see an overlap between the reproductive system and the urinary system when looking at the penis. The penis contains the urethra, and the urethra is where we connect to both the reproductive and urinary systems. We do not see this overlap in the female reproductive system, and I'll make sure to point that out in the female reproductive video as well. Let's look a little deeper at the penis. The glans penis is the tip, and this is usually covered by a foreskin, although that foreskin can be removed through a process called circumcision. And the glans penis is extremely sensitive. There are many, many, many nerve fibers and receptors found in the glans penis. On occasion, though, a male may experience what we call erectile dysfunction. Within the penis, there is erectile tissue that will swell and engorge with blood to allow a male to engage in sexual intercourse. However, on occasion, the erectile tissue does not expand enough to compress the veins and retain that blood, and so that male would not be able to maintain an erection for sexual intercourse. Here we see the penis in more detail. We see the glans penis right here, and the foreskin, which may or may not be present, as it is commonly removed through circumcision. There are many hormones involved in males in maintaining the reproductive system of males. Gonadotropin-releasing hormone is secreted by the hypothalamus and helps regulate other hormones being released by the anterior pituitary gland and later on the gonads. The anterior pituitary gland will release follicle-stimulating hormone, or FSH, as well as luteinizing hormone, or LH. Follicle-stimulating hormone promotes the production of sperm, while luteinizing hormone helps control the production of testosterone. And testosterone is a much-needed hormone in males as it helps with normal development and functioning of the male reproductive organs. So we can see that regulation process happening here. Here's our hypothalamus releasing the gonadotropin-releasing hormone. We're communicating with the anterior pituitary, which can release luteinizing as well as follicle-stimulating hormones. The testes will respond to both FSH and LH by producing sperm as well as testosterone. When the levels are high enough, as well of sperm, inhibin, and testosterone, we can basically tell the hypothalamus and tell the anterior pituitary that we don't need any more being produced. And that will slow down how much LH and FSH is being released.